Welcome, everybody, to another Ideas That Matter conversation. I have here a good friend and colleague, Phil Yanov, who, among a number of different things, is the co-founder of a long-running organization, set of events, conversations, networking called Tech After 5. But that's not how we actually got connected. It was through Modern Stoicism. We're both team members. And if you have been to any of the online Stoicons, which have been the case since COVID hit, Phil is the person who makes everything work on the back end. And you see him as well during it. But there's another really cool thing that you probably want to check out that I think we'll probably start out by talking about. And this is I think it's been running now for 2.5 years, maybe, Conversations with Modern Stoicism, much more interactive online way of connecting. You have a speaker come in, talk for a bit, people get to ask some questions, you ask some questions, and they go into breakout rooms, discuss things, come back, there's more discussion. And actually, I'll start with this. So online conferences, it's tough to get the in-person feel and, we might say, juice that you would normally get in a face-to-face real life event. But I think Conversations with Modern Stoicism, that model really works well for that.
Yeah, thanks. I think, to your point, the thing about it is I didn't see, nobody was doing anything that I felt had that vibe, right? And the thing is, we've done several Stoicons at this point. And so we know what it looks like to do like a full day event. By the way, I've worked with some other folks who've done 3-day events online. Oh. Wow, that's painful. I mean, that's a lot of time to have someone's butt sitting in a seat, right? You need Pilates or a chiropractor when you're done. But But I think for the event, what I never saw, and I talked to our good friend Donald Robertson about this a number of times, because I'd said, look, there's something missing here, and I think I know how to fix it. So I'm trying. So I did a thing. I tested it out on some other groups first, right? Small group settings, kind of did it. And so now, we're at 39 events or something like that. So we do this at least every month. In fact, we're doing it twice this month.
Okay.
So we do a bunch of these events, but the idea is just like you said. So we start with a trusted voice, a presentation from somebody who we think has got their Stoicism figured out. I mean, a solid, strong, trusted person. We start with a trusted voice, and then we go into breakout rooms with questions based on the material. So we seed a good conversation, and then we just throw you to a table as if you might do if you were at a regular conference. We do it in small groups. You're typically in a room with 5 people total, so there's 4 folks total, and we give you some time, and you go around the table and just share some of your own reflections. But the neat thing about it is we get people, I'd like to say we get them globally, and we do, but let's be serious. Most of who we're getting is Europe to the West Coast, right? Because that's the timing works good for them. But we still get people that show up who live in Sydney and Melbourne, and it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning for them, and they still come.
Yeah, that's tough. It turns out there's actually quite a few people interested in Stoicism in Indonesia as well. And it'd be interesting to see what happens if we can reach the Indian or Chinese or some of these other mass culture area markets, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that you're right. How could we do that? My issue is, I say today, you've got to be able to speak English, understand English, because that's kind of the thing that we're doing today.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to be forever. And I've been approached more than once to take the program and present it in another language. Now, obviously, that's not going to be me, because this is about it for me, but is English. But it's like I said, I can order in a French restaurant and Spanish, but that's about it, right? But there are folks that are like, let's take the material, translate it, and then we'll lead the discussions in French. So I think it's like Stoa Gallica has considered doing that as an example.
So would the initial presentation be in English then, along with like, I don't know, a translation of it, and then the questions would be in
Right.
French? Okay.
Yeah. So basically, you'd take the front end of material, and the thing is that could be both closed caption, and now there's some pretty good material for actually doing a dynamic translation. It's tough when you get into Greek words and all the rest of it, but I
Yeah.
mean normal English kind of works really well. And so, but you could take that, the conversational stuff, translate that, and you'd have the presentation so that it might be heard or be able to be read by people in multiple languages. But then you'd say, okay, now we're going to go run the rest of the conversation in German, in French.
Yeah, I know there
whatever.
was a Stoicon-X Brazil a few years back where they had some of us present in English, because I mean I don't speak Portuguese.
Portuguese, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can order, like you said, I can find out where the bathroom is and order and stuff,
Yeah, right.
and that's about it. And they had like a live translator doing it, and I can't imagine how cacophonous that must have been for people listening to it. Didn't affect me at all.
Right.
But yeah, that was kind of interesting. Yeah, that's something definitely to think about. So actually, that's a kind of a good lead in to talking about something else that I imagine you're probably much better known for Tech After 5 than for things that you do with modern Stoicism, just because Stoicism is, it's not a niche thing, but the audience is smaller than the tech world in general. And you've been doing Tech After 5 for quite a long
18
time.
years.
Yeah. So tell
18
us
years.
about that. What is it? And people, for anyone who doesn't have any idea what that means.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun because it is both what I started with, and it was the way I brought these two things together. I'll tell you that and how I did that. But the first part is Tech After 5. So for 18 years, I've been doing live in-person networking events for the tech community, and that is Tech After 5, right? And prior to the pandemic, we actually had built that up, and we were doing them in multiple cities every month. I mean, we're still doing multiple cities, but it's not quite the same. But we were, I was doing it in 3 cities in South Carolina, 2 in North Carolina. I was doing Atlanta, Georgia at one time. I had an event in Bangalore, India prior to the pandemic, right? Obviously, I wasn't traveling to that whenever, but we had an event that was being run there, and I could do for them like I'm doing right here. I'm on Zoom or something and do a camera in just to say hi to them and all that. But yeah, we had an event in Bangalore as well. I've done them in some other cities as well. But the idea that was, again, have spent much of my career helping other tech people do tech things and find gigs and to find customers and stuff like that. So we do those in multiple cities every month, and folks just come together and we swap ideas.
I imagine there's a lot of networking that's taking place there as well, right?
That's really primarily it, right? So the thing is, it's always been, I don't like loose networking. This is facilitated networking.
Yeah.
So we kind of do what we do in a way, sort of in conversation. So the thing that made Tech After 5 different, or has made it different, is from the get-go, we ask you what it is you're trying to get done. What kinds of people would you like to meet? What are you up to? And we put that out so that everyone can see who they're going to be in the room with before they get there. So we send them a little document and all that stuff knows, and we encourage everybody, just make a list of 5 people you'd like to talk to at the event and figure out what it is you're going to ask them, et cetera. And so it's facilitated networking. So that got me there. So the crazy thing in here is that the pandemic hit, and of course I couldn't do live in-person events anymore, right? So again, we were doing them in all these cities and I couldn't do them. So I started doing them on Zoom. And I didn't know Zoom very well in the beginning. And quite frankly, I didn't actually like Zoom a lot. I was like, in fact, just recently, I came across a newspaper clipping where a newspaper had reached out to me for quote, and there's a quote of me saying that online meetings will never work.
Oh, wow.
That basically, yeah. It's me standing at a podium in front. I was doing an MC job, a gig in an event. And then the pull quote, not just in the article, but the pull quote for the article was online events will never work. That didn't age very well.
Well, I have a few of those sorts of things out there, declarations that I've made about things in either academia or tech or philosophy.
Yeah.
I should probably dig those up. That'd be kind of funny to put them together.
It's my own misquotes, right? But I was like, oh, this is just kind of crazy. And the thing is, I couldn't see it. I will say that, of all the things, of all the negative impacts, of course, of the pandemic, the positive one is we learned how to do online events in a way that we couldn't have done before. And, that was how, I was involved in Stoicism some, and I reached out. It occurred to me, pandemic hits in March 2020, right? Right around St. Patrick's Day in the US. And so it occurs to me as I'm getting this, I got to do something, which I did. And then I was like, I got pretty good at this. And I saw at that time, both Donald and Massimo were still on Twitter. And I saw them planning the October event, which I think was going to be in Toronto that year.
That's right.
I said,
be in Toronto again. Yeah.
And I said, that's never going to happen. I reached out to Donald and said, this is not going to happen. I said, however, I've gotten pretty good at this Zoom thing now. I'm doing events. In fact, at that time, I was doing multiple events a week. So I was doing 3 events a week on my tech side, right? So I was doing 3 events a week. And I said, I think we can do this. There's some things we have to figure out, but I think we can do this. And, I think Donald finally figured it out. And Massimo was like, we got to do something. So let's do this. And the 3 of us got together and ran that first Stoicon, and we figured out it does work. And it's super cool because even in events where people couldn't travel, they could show up to this, right? So we had a global audience immediately. That's pretty awesome.
And we got good video footage from it. So an archival thing. I mean, I was recording when I'd go to Stoicon, I'd do a presentation and record it, but I was like the outlier when it came to that. As a matter of fact, I wanted to go back to something. So the pandemic, right? Like you said, everyone had to go online. And I'm thinking in terms of academia, I was teaching at 4 different places and tapped into a whole bunch of other ones through the different, like consulting work that I do. And I'd been teaching online at that point 9 years or so. So I kind of had it down how to do it in different platforms and how to use videos and stuff like that. But for everyone else, it was like a crash course. And so I gave a lot of like advice to people and even to some institutions about, well, here's how you do this sort of thing, so it doesn't completely suck for your students. Right. And it was a great opportunity that got completely thrown away by so many institutions to develop, competency and new skills, right? So I saw of the places that I was teaching, now one was so dysfunctional that they would never have learned any lessons anyway. The most dysfunctional place.
Not a learning organization.
Exactly, yeah. And now one adapted and has a very robust online presence down to the day. The other 2 that I was teaching at, everybody had to go online. And then as soon as they had the opportunity to like go back to face-to-face, there was this narrative that the students really, really want face-to-face. And that was BS, because a lot of the students were like, yeah, online classes are awesome. So much more flexibility. If the instructor's doing it right, it can really be a great enhancer. But the faculty and administrators were like, no, we know our students. And I think part of it was they were very invested in the on-campus experience. So all of that kind of withered on the vine, and all of that like budding expertise just got rolled back. And actually one of them, I quit teaching at their place because they were like, well, you got to come back to campus. And I was like, for what you pay, I'm not coming back.
Doesn't make sense.
I'll teach online as long as you want me to, but I'm not driving, 45 minutes to an hour for what you pay for a class.
Sure.
Now I'm interested in whether you saw something similar happening within wider tech corporate world stuff where, like you said, a lot of people figured out, hey, this could actually be quite good. I mean, we do have lots of work from home people and meetings that are done online now, which I think a lot of people were resistant to pre-COVID. But it
Yeah.
seems like a lot of people didn't learn the lesson, which isn't that everything has to go online all the time and we have to exist in some sort of weird, totally mediated environment. But
Right.
that, it's a great alternative.
Yeah. In my world, right, I've seen tech companies that they learned the lesson like that.
Okay.
And they're and they have built organizations that are global and they can't be in a room because they don't even live in the same countries, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, my wife, who is an accountant and works for a firm, their boss wanted to see them in the office every day, right? So even post-COVID, it's like, nope. And, we always talk about presence being a proxy for productivity, right?
Yeah.
So it's the idea is oh, if I see you, you must be doing something for me. And I think people are kind of getting that wrong. There's two things to be done here, and really, I'm interested in how you see this because I've been noodling around some ideas on this for myself, which is there's a reason to be in person, and there's a reason to be, to do what we're doing right now, to be online for a thing. And I don't think we're getting that quite right, what the reasons are. Let me posit an idea, and I want you to push back if you think I'm nuts, because I trust your opinion. But I think that for didactic activity, online is better. Because if you're teaching me a thing and I didn't hear you, I can watch the captions, I can hit rewind, I can learn from you, and I can dig a little deeper just by scrubbing a video, so to speak, right?
Yeah, yeah.
However, there's a different component where we need the social component. So, right, if it's small enough, I suppose you could do philosophy table on a Zoom, but I don't think it's quite the same. That's a thing where I'd like to have people in a space where they're kind of interacting with each other if you could, because I think there is, if I want that group to bond as a cohort, I need to put them in a room. I can do it online, but it takes much longer, lots more interactions to make it happen. And I have a couple of groups I've done that with, and it's shocking to watch it at work. But it took a long time to build. But I think if I can just go faster if I can put you in a room together. If the job is to thread you all together and have you act as a unit, I got to put you in a room, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Even, with some of the classes that I teach, I look at them and I'm like, yeah, this one isn't going to work as an online class. It really needs to be students together in the room. And, one of the places that I teach, it's one building, the Milwaukee School of Art and Design, or Institute of Art and Design. It's one giant building and all the students are there, and the dorms are actually across the street for the most part. So they're seeing each other plenty, but, and they're mostly lower level classes. I think it would be tough I pity the people who had to try to teach sculpture online during the pandemic, or art history, you can definitely, that would actually benefit from being online. But, a lot of the studio classes, no way, you got to have that hands-on, being able to look at it from multiple areas, perspective. Yeah. But
I don't think it's for everything.
Yeah. So we got didactic, training, education things. What about other, you mentioned people being in the office, the big complaint that gets made is, well, you're losing the social component, right? And it kind of depends on the company you're in. You might be like, well, I don't like any of these people, so I don't want to.
That would be sad.
Yeah, socialize with them.
Yeah.
But what's your take on that?
Here's, I'm an old guy. I don't need any more friends. I got lots of friends, kind of a thing, right? But if I was young and I
Yeah.
might be in family formation, or, I know you and Andy are doing this, your Stoic Heart thing. But I mean, young people have to be bumped up against one another to figure out who they like and who,
Mm,
who's a good fit for them and have those kinds of things. And I am a fan of particularly young people. And I think, by the way, it's not just romantic relationships or
yeah.
personal relationships. I think a mentoring relationship, quite frankly, for most young people is better in person than it is to do online.
I think that's right.
Again,
Yeah. Yeah.
we can do it. It's just the fidelity. There's something that's happening about that in-person place that makes it work better.
Yeah, and with that sort of thing, you could easily imagine a hybrid where, I don't know, you see your mentor in person at the coffee shop once a month, and then you're connecting with them online or even by email for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I have one group. We meet every Friday. We meet in the morning. Every Friday we meet, and it's all Zoom. And we've been doing that since the pandemic. It
Okay.
all started all that, right? So it was in person before. That Friday meeting was in person before. Then we meet, and that is basically the functional part of what we're doing. And then 2 weeks out of 4, we'll meet for beers on Friday afternoon. And that's the social component of what we do. And
Yeah.
that group is indissoluble at this point, right? I mean, they're so cemented together.
I want to come back to something earlier. So, pre-group, let's say, the networking thing. And I forget exactly what term you use, but you've got like structured networking, and then you didn't call it cold networking, loose networking.
Yeah. Yeah, loose networking, right? I
Okay.
mean, there's a bunch of different terms for that in space, but the idea of
So,
just toss people in a room and hope for the best, I think, is a little
so I've got
naive.
some ideas about what's not great about loose networking from my own
Mm,
experience and
sure.
things like that. But I'm curious to hear why because you've done a lot more of setting these things up, of observation of people, getting feedback. I won't say what's wrong with loose networking, because maybe there's some occasions where that's exactly what you want. But what's not as satisfactory about it?
Oh, about loose networking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've said I said this in a newspaper article several years ago, maybe a decade ago. It's like most networking events suck. We're not going to do that. We're just not going to do that. So the issue with loose networking is I don't know. I mean, I'm just thrown into a thing where I really am going to have to dig to find what I'm looking for. And even a little bit of sense of purpose, a little bit of facilitation helps. We do things like color coded name badges. We send you a list ahead of time. But the idea is, I get it. We're all looking for gold. We all know we're going to have to move a bunch of rocks to make that, but I can help you just a little bit make this work better, right? And so that's why we do the things we do to make this easier.
I was going to say, somebody like me who's, kind of in a niche, I've gone to networking events that, like you said, sucked, because I go there and, I've got my little name badge and it says, Greg Sadler, president or founder, Reason IO. And people are like,
Yeah.
what's Reason IO? And I'll be like, well, it's a company that puts philosophy into practice. And the conversations about that, with a few exceptions, are like so surface level. People will be like, oh yeah, I remember taking a philosophy class, Descartes, I think therefore I am. And I'm like, well, that's great. And if they want to
That's a
ask me
start.
about, yeah, if
Yeah.
they want to ask me about what I'm doing, we can actually have a conversation. But most of it is just kind of a waste of time, or I get tapped to do like what it is that I do by
Mm,
them for free, which
sure.
I don't want to be giving product away, so to speak. And I imagine there's probably a lot of other, it's not like philosophy is unique in that way. There's probably a lot of other people, even in businesses, where they're like, yeah, it just doesn't pay to go to these networking events.
Yeah. I don't know that all do, and I understand that. And the thing is, that very feeling oh my gosh, this is a waste of my time,
Yeah.
that's the feeling I'm combating. So that's why I do all of the things that we do, so that when you walk in, you're not scared or feeling like this is useless because we're actually like, here's a thread, pull on this thread, go meet this guy.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing. But I understand from your side too, what that might be, right? That, yeah, you go in and start talking to people. It's like, oh, philosophy. I don't know if I know anything about that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty good at like selling what I do. I actually sometimes say my job is selling Plato or Aristotle or Epictetus, and I've got a good product, but it's still, it's
Nice.
tiresome to do over and over again. I was actually gonna, since you mentioned like emotional dimensions to that, I was gonna bring up an interesting experience that I had where it was all philosophy people. And at the American Philosophical Association Eastern Conference, which used to be where you had to go for your first round interviews for academic jobs. And it was always at a terrible time. They scheduled it between Christmas and New Year's. So you'd have to like leave your family. And I mean, it's show your dedication, right?
That's
And
right.
it would always be in some very expensive Eastern city, either New York or Boston or Philly or something like that, right? And you're paying
Right.
like premium hotel rates too. So they had something they called the smoker. And originally people would smoke at it, like cigars and cigarettes. And what they do is it's like in a giant ballroom. They bring out like 10 or so kegs of cheap beer, and everybody's like, getting their beer. And then schools would have tables. If you were, if you had enough of a budget, you'd have a table that you could sit at.
Right.
And I was interviewing at a few places, but I kind of didn't care about the kind of protocol. And I was like, well, I should go observe this. And the stink of desperation was like palpable in the air. All these people who, because the idea is, well, maybe you were one of 16 people interviewing with school X. You better go and talk to them that night and try to, like, I don't know, impress them about you're different than the rest of the candidates.
Sure.
And it was a pretty uncomfortable situation, even for somebody who wasn't invested in it. And I can just imagine what it was like for the people who'd been told by their advisors, well, you got to go to the smoker, remember to make a good impression, network, And I also get a little bit of that feel sometimes going to other loose networking events. Like everybody's there kind of on the make, worried about, can I get how many business cards am I going to get? How many LinkedIn contacts? And it feels, I don't know, it just feels kind of gross to me.
It can. It certainly can, right? And I agree that it can. I mean, you gave the example, right? There were a lot of qualified people and not a lot of positions, right?
Right.
And so that happens sometimes, in tech. I've watched it go both ways. I watched it go where anybody who could fog a mirror had a job.
Yeah.
Right. We've been in that space. And now, again, we're at that spot where, like, unless you are really good at what you do and it's clear that you're really good, there's not a lot of gigs out there for you right now. It's pretty thin pickings in the tech space at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're right about that. And as you said, I think it can feel bad, if you're going to go in there and going to compete with a bunch of people, that's grumbly. You have to figure out some way to tip the table. Go be charming. Go be interesting or provocative in some way. But and the other thing is, I think even at those spaces, by the way, if you go into a thing like that, almost nobody shows up having done their homework. And so we teach people to do their homework ahead of time. Who are you going to be talking to? Where is that person from? What did they know about? What are the relationships you might have with them, or how you might be connected to them in unexpected ways? And I think if you do the research, you can get much further than people who don't.
Yeah, I really like that idea about having your top 5 that you want to find. It's almost like a scavenger hunt, right? Where the scavenged is moving around the room, right?
Yeah, it's gamification of an event that might otherwise be unpleasant.
It's interesting that you bring up that term. Now, do you use other gamification, let's call them techniques or principles in Tech After Five or in Conversations with Modern Stoicism?
Not so much at Conversations with Modern Stoicism, although that like the way we handle the questions is I want them to be self-reflective. I want people to be able to tell a story about themselves because I want people to be able to sit at a table and tell a story about themselves. And you sitting there, you're going to tell one story and you're going to hear four more. And when you do that, you're going to realize the world's a much bigger place. So my sneaky thing that's happening is the world is bigger. The marketplace of ideas is much bigger than you might have imagined. And I'm just going to put you into contact with it and you can figure out what the next step is going to be.
That's
But
interesting.
we've done,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
With the Conversations with Modern Stoicism. So the Stoic Heart one, we've taken a few of the questions that some of the people asked in that Valentine's Day one,
right.
and used them as sort of fodder because we don't have enough, paid subscribers at this point. That's one of their perks is they get to ask a question, and so we took some from that because they were really good. So far, we've taken two, and both of the people were kind of telling a story. There was the one about, well, I embrace Stoicism, and it seems to have had a negative effect on my relationships because people don't like the fact that I'm changing. I feel a bit more lonely. What should I do? And then there was the I'm out of relationships. I don't feel like I need to be in one. Convince me otherwise. And so both of those had aspects of storytelling to them. So that's in part due to how you set it up with the people who attend. Okay.
Well, yeah. So I always work with the presenters on the questions, but I always tell them ahead of time, we're looking for self-reflective things. We're looking, and we're trying to keep them from coaching each other in the room because that usually doesn't turn out very well anyway. But I don't want that to happen, but I want them to be self-reflective. It depends on, like, so for example, just me thinking about you and Andy's challenge, right, with the Stoic Heart, right? So if I ask people to look backwards on proud moments or things that really worked well, I get to see what's important to them. And then I might get to tell a story about how that moves forward into other things, right? Yeah. So if I look back and say, hey, tell me a moment in a relationship where you managed to do something that worked really well. And can share with other people. So you can, but the thing is you can pull a piece out of that, right? So, I might say to you, Greg, my wife's, I love my wife and she has all of these sort of hangups that she came out of her youth with. Wonderful family, all this stuff. But there are things that concern her in the world, right? And I realize that she is most of the time scared about our relationship. So my thing is always to realize that I'm dealing with someone that I want to comfort in that moment. So I can be right. All right. I could use Socratic moral intellectualism and I could be right, but right isn't good enough because relationships are about love. They're not about being right. And so that way I could craft that into a thing to say, okay, if I'm talking to someone who might be scared of what happens next, let's take the fear out of the equation because neither one of us are negotiating very well if we're negotiating from a place of fear. Right? So let's get that out there. I said, and so like I would tell my wife all the time, I said, one of us is going out of this in a box. That's how this ends, right? So I'm not at all concerned. There's nothing that's going to happen here. We're not going to say a thing that's going to impair our relationship to the point that someone walks away from it. One of us goes out in a box. Well, now let's figure out where we're going to go from there. But that thing of saying, how am I dealing with people? What's going on? I think I just kind of rambled around it. But that's where I think I would be. Oh, I was telling the idea that if I look backwards and talk about something worked well, I found out which we're proud of, what something that I like. That shows me to some level which something is important to me. So, or was important in the relationship or whatever. And then if I ask people to kind of cast forward or to talk about a challenge or something that they're concerned about coming up, that lets me know where they want me to spend time kind of pulling at the threads of their Gordian knot, right? But they want me to think about that. So that's why, one of the things we do on some of our events where we do check-ins, we do professionally, if I'm on a professional group, I always do rose, thorn, bud. And I ask people to check in. Rose is something that's working well.
Okay.
Thorn is where I have a current challenge. And bud is something that I see developing in my future that might be interesting, useful, otherwise. Now, in personal stuff, I usually just do roses and thorns because I'm not trying to solve that same set of problems. But so rose is what's worked well. Tell me something. And thorn is like what's not working great at the moment. And I just end up with this in my groups. I end up with this giant list of things to work on. I'm like, okay, he's having a problem with the people at work. She's having a problem with her godson. This other guy is having trouble with his girlfriend. And so those are all the things that I use. But by having them do this check-in process and tell a story about what's working well and what's challenging for them, I understand where to apply the technique of being a group facilitator in that space.
Yeah. So that's, those are some really interesting things. Actually, it makes me think about something that could be kind of fun to adapt. You brought up like, particularly with romantic relationships, you could talk about what was good in a previous relationship or what you think you could have done better or what you're proud of, and not getting jealous of somebody who's no longer on the scene is a big difficulty, I think, for a lot of people. But that could be an incredibly productive conversation to have because, we don't have to reinvent every single wheel, right? And you could do that as well, I think, in professional settings, because it's a different kind of jealousy, right? People want to be the first to have articulated the next big thing, or
we have this all the time. You see it in professional settings the same way. That's normally where I'm applying my thinking. But I could see this applying inside of personal relationships a lot, right?
Yeah. Hey, so shifting gears a little bit and coming back to Conversations with Modern Stoicism. And I think, given like the number of them that you've done so far, it's probably 3 years that it's been going on, right? Closer to?
I could check the dates, but I don't. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it is 3 years. Yeah.
So, that's a substantial body of work. By the way, I should mention these are, if I remember right, they're all available in the Modern Stoicism channel, right?
Yeah, they're on YouTube, right?
Yeah, so people can check that out. What were some of the like real standout ones for you where you felt like that was a really great session or something interesting got articulated over that?
Was this the first one? The very first one? It was either that one or another one that John Sellers did. But John Sellers did it. He did the very first one because that's how I set it up. And then we did a couple. I think he's done one with us after that. But John did this presentation, and the idea was that wealth is an indifferent, and he compared Epictetus to Seneca. And basically, it was that moment, like, the thing is, if you come to Stoicism out of a Christian tradition that thinks of it as being filthy lucre, you've kind of got this whole set of ideas that money is bad, and that, how could Seneca talk like that when he was in all of that kind of stuff? And John just kind of laid the pieces out there in a way that I think just caught some folks off guard. And I thought, all right, this is valuable lesson here to think about. If we say it's anaphora, what does that actually mean, right? So how does that work, and what would we do? Anyway, I thought that was fun and interesting, and maybe just a little bit provocative, right, to be down that path, because it isn't what we see all the time.
Yeah, and any intentional way of life is probably, when you unpack it, going to be provocative or countercultural, however you want to phrase it, right? Paradoxical for quite a few people. And you've probably seen that go bad. I don't necessarily mean with Conversations with Modern Stoicism, but where they don't stick the launch, so to speak, right?
Nice.
So, I'm not going to ask for like instances of that, but why do you think it goes bad when they've got a great idea, but somehow it's not clicking with the audience. It might actually send the audience away less interested in the idea or less receptive to the idea.
I don't think I've ever had that happen here. I have, by the way, had this happen at other events that I've done, right? Where I've had presenters come in and they just lose the audience. I'm trying to figure out how to tell this without telling the people, but I had a presenter come in one time that was so bad in front of a live audience. They were so far off the topic of what I was having them talk about, which was actual cybersecurity problems within the business.
Okay.
And this was, let's say this was 8 years ago, maybe we were doing the session. It was so bad that her colleagues standing in the back said, "Can we do this again next month?" It's like, can we do a do-over and just and have someone else do the presentation next month and we'll talk about the same thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this was in fact not useful for the audience. It was, but how does it happen when you get it off? I mean, so many people, I think the reason this goes wrong is that you've got a solution, but you never tied it to the people who were looking, right? So no one was actually either looking for it or you never tied it to them in a way that made sense to them. And so you just kind of lost the audience to begin with, right? And even since then, I've seen other presentations. It's not just because it was technical kerfuffles or they didn't really know the material very well or something like that. But, the most frequent thing I see in a presenter is they don't make any attempt to meet the audience where they are. I'm gonna guess that that probably happens with academics some more often. You kind of get to a thing. I'm here to explain to you. I don't know, not the gorgeous, but pick one. And they're going to tell you a tale. And it's like, wait, nobody asked that question, and you didn't tell me why I should care before we got started.
It's interesting. Yeah, it does happen a lot with academics, probably more than with other people. Right. And it's even academics talking to other academics where they're interested, they're geeking out about this particular thing that they're really into, and they don't realize that the rest of the room doesn't really care about that and are just showing up to see what they're talking about. Happens a lot at conferences. Or where it turns into like a side conversation, like between the presenter and one or two commentators, and then the rest of the audience, they lose them. And there's that entire rhetorical dimension. By the way, two philosophers in ancient times who are like, you absolutely can't screw this up or nobody's going to listen to you, are Aristotle and Cicero. Cicero even says, like at the beginning of the Stoic paradoxes, you guys are great, but nobody wants to hear things put in terms of syllogisms. Let me show you how it's done, So, there's that entire aspect. And I think among academics, I don't know, maybe there's a sense of like, even still today, you don't want to debase what you're doing and just popularize it, throw pearls among swine or something like that. And it's really stupid because, if you only have an audience of like 3 people who want to read your stuff or hear you talk, you're not going to have much impact. The people who are, having some sort of impact can talk to a wide audience and respond on their feet to somebody. I mean, here'd be a good litmus test. There's some guy in the back and he's like, yeah, I heard all the stuff you said, but what the hell does that have to do with me? If you can't actually respond on your feet and say, well, thank you for asking that. Here's how what Aristotle or Seneca or, Descartes or whoever actually might apply to you, and then lay it out.
There's me.
Yeah. You probably haven't sorted it out well enough. I mean, I will say that. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of, oh my gosh, there's a famous restaurateur when he said, if you can't explain the concept of your restaurant in 2 sentences, then you don't actually know what you're doing. You don't know. And the point being is like, so I think you're right that for most people, if you can't bridge this to something, then you're not really effectively communicating. Let me finish. I realize I left part of that sentence out. If you can't bridge where you are to where your audience started, then you're not really communicating with them. I mean, it could be aspirational, etc.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you legitimately want to talk to them about this and have them understand it, then you got to kind of meet them where they are. And I always say this is that if we think of ourselves as bridge builders in ideas, right?
Yeah.
And that basically I can build a bridge, but and I always start where I am. But the fact of the matter is I need to get it to where they're starting from. And so if I want to say, if you want to meet me here, let me help you make this transit. Let me help you find a path from there to here. And that's my job.
Yeah, I wonder if some people either maybe they're not mistaken about who their audience is, but they wish the audience that they have at that time is a different audience that would, I don't know, make them feel better about what they're doing. But you get the people that you get. So, if you're doing a presentation, for example, at the local public library, that's not going to be the same thing as, like, I don't know, an academic colloquium where you're invited in as the key speaker and you can trust that everybody knows a little bit about, say, Stoicism or Middle Platonism and actually cares about it one way or the
Right.
other. Actually, so I'll throw this idea out at you and see what you think about this. So there's like gigs where you speak and you've been brought in and it's going to be a general audience and you cannot presume any sort of background. And that's a lot like teaching the 100 level service classes so for philosophy, they're ethics, intro to philosophy,
Right.
critical thinking. And I think those are the most challenging classes to teach, also the most impactful because you're actually reaching people outside of the little narrow sphere that you're in. And those are the ones that if you do them, you can either do them well, in which case it's going to be challenging and a lot of work for you. And you're going to have to like figure out how to answer people who are like, why the hell should I care about any of this crap? I'm just taking this required course, or I just showed up at this thing. Or you go the other way and you ruin the experience for yourself and your students, and you become a sourpuss by saying, I'm slumming with these dummies. I have to teach these classes, but this is what you got to do for the time being. And then I'll someday get to teach in the place I want. So I think, there's a lot of continuities there between talking to a general audience, like, being invited to, I don't know, talk to the local JCs or something like that, right? About what philosophy might have to offer them. There's a lot in common with teaching 101.
Yeah, you can't deliver the same presentation to the Rotary Club and to your colloquium is exactly what you just said. And that's absolutely true.
You can try.
You could, but that's probably not the thing that's going to work for you, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the whole, who am I talking to? What are they hoping to get out of this? And let me use that. Or it might be, I'm just going to talk to myself for a while. And if people understand it, that's okay. And if they don't, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but if the idea, you started with the idea of, if I want to have impact, how am I going to have impact?
Yeah.
And I have to have impact by delivering people in a language that they understand, right? As you well point out, I don't get to talk to an audience and use terms of art if they are not already familiar with these terms of art, right? So I use the transitive verb cabined in something that I wrote today, and I was like, okay, this was a translator's choice in a letter from Seneca, and I said I got to come back and I'm going to explain what cabined meant. Because I think it's kind of a fun word as a transitive verb. And it was something Shakespeare said, right? So we see these words come out of Macbeth's mouth, right? But I was like, if I don't do this, someone's going to look at that and go, what the heck does that mean exactly? Yeah. But I can have a little bit of fun and I can pull them forward with me and somebody will get a wink or a laugh out of that and enjoy that bit of it.
I was just thinking a little bit earlier as you were saying that maybe somebody doesn't want to have impact, right? Maybe that's what you and I are into, but a person could just like do a presentation where they are essentially talking to themselves. And if anyone happens to get it, so much the better for them. But if nobody does, then they walk away and they got their I think the sage on the stage kind of teacher is like that, where they're gonna teach their stuff that they're having the students read, and maybe the students don't even read it and they don't know what this guy's talking about, for 50 minutes 3 times a week. I certainly have had colleagues like that. So, maybe wanting to have impact is kind of it's not something we could take as a universal. I mean, I have a hard time thinking like, well, I like this stuff. Why wouldn't I want it to be communicated effectively to somebody else? But maybe some people don't care about that.
Let's imagine for a minute, and rather than your sage on the stage, let's think about the Stoic sage, right? The ideal character.
Okay, yeah.
Now, that Stoic sage probably does not care about applause. But if they are in fact having a conversation and acting with virtue, an excellent conversation with someone else is somewhere where we're actually having communication.
Yeah.
Where some idea is being moved from one place to another. You remind me of a model that I've taught inside of my other calls, not my tech calls. And it is like level 0 communication is nothing happens, right? You tell me who you are and I forget. That's level 0. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Level 1 is information takes place, right? So I say my name and you remember it. You say your name and I remember it. That's information. Level 2, there's emotional engagement. You said something and it sparked interest in me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, I need to think about that. Or I might want to go do some more research on that. I want to, but I'm going to noodle on that. And then in my events where I'm trying to get people to network, I'm looking for level 3 where it's appropriate, which is they agree to collaborate on something, right? They agree that they're going to become intertwined. And at level 3, they're going to like, you know what, Greg, you and I ought to work on a thing together. Maybe you and I could have a conversation about this or that. Would you be up for that? And that's the level 3 component, right? And I'm mostly trying to keep people from not having those level 0 conversations where someone says something and you weren't even listening. So why are we talking?
Yeah, that's a good point. Both in networking and in like speakers and in teaching, right? Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we do pretty bad in education in terms of retention. And you can blame it on the students. You can be like, well, they don't really care about these classes that we have them take as gen ed. Maybe they don't even care about their major classes that much. And that's probably true for some of them. And it's understandable. I mean, people go to college for the college experience and, play intramural sports and date and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
But I think that's kind of a cop out for educators who, if your students can't actually, let's take an ethics class, and let's say you taught some Aristotle, some John Stuart Mill for utilitarianism, some Kant for deontology. If they can't a couple of years later remember any of that stuff, it could be that they were sloughing off, but it could also be that you were a crappy teacher and didn't have any interesting stuff to say about why this would actually apply to them. And I'll tell you, so I used to teach a business ethics class pretty routinely at Marquette University. And at that time, Marquette had not yet shrunk the core, so they were required to take an ethics class. Every single one of them had an ethics class, anywhere from one semester, the semester before, to 2 years before they got into the business ethics class. And so I was like, well, we need a baseline. We got to figure out like what these kids actually know and have retained. So I spent like about, 10 minutes the very first class session polling them about, well, do you know this concept, or can you associate this idea with this person? And almost none of them. And these are smart, motivated kids in a variety of different majors. Almost none of them could remember anything from their ethics classes. And I was like, wow, now let's think about this in terms of a business proposition. That class cost you $5,000. If you take into account what tuition is and how many classes you're taking, you paid them to sit your butt for 16 weeks and complete assignments and take tests, and you don't remember a single thing out of that. Now, let's think about this. Do you want that to be what your experience with this class with business ethics, because we're going to talk about some of the same stuff. Hopefully you actually retain some of these ideas 5 years from now, because otherwise, you're just paying me to, like, chat with you. Or you're paying Marquette, because for the cost of an adjunct,
you weren't getting the whole $5,000.
Well, only one of them is paying my salary. All the rest of them are paying the rest of the institution.
Yeah.
And you could, like, you could see their eyes like opening wide, and they're thinking about it, and they're like, yeah, holy crap, And then you start thinking about, like, how many other classes they took where they didn't retain anything either,
Sure.
It's kind of a bad business proposition, and economically,
I mean, the thing is, if they could have just written a check and gotten the diploma, they'd have been happy with that, right? That was really, they were playing a different game.
Some of them, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly, here, the total trivia, the reason why business ethics classes are so big in Wisconsin colleges and universities is, in Wisconsin, you can't become a CPA without having business ethics on your transcript. So
wow,
you always have, accounting
all
students.
The CPAs, all the accounting students come through. That's good.
Keeping it afloat. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are currently paying for the fact that people don't have a good grounding in ethics.
Yeah, very much so. And, we're paying in part because it's not there in K through 12 education. Even just like sort of an introduction to, hey, here's some Aristotle, here's what Kant said, like they have in other high school curricula in other countries, where maybe somebody doesn't even do it well, but at least they give you some ideas about it, along with some other stuff for about a year or two. Think about France or Portugal or any of these national curricula, So we don't have that at all. And then they come to college and, maybe they take a philosophy class, or maybe they get out of that sort of thing in some other way. Maybe they get some talk about it in some other class, like in a business management class. Maybe they bring up ethics. Maybe they don't,
Maybe they don't. Yeah. I don't know that there is a whole lot of that in there.
I'm not a big believer in, if we all make them take a class, then, it'll all get better. That's clearly not the case. But
education is not the problem. It's not, that it is not the core issue. What's happening here. I always think about that because people say, well, if we taught this, and I was like, we've been at this for 2,000 years. If you just want to take Hellenistic philosophy, I think we've taken a swing at this. Education is not the problem. Yeah.
I mean, you can say similar things. I'd be curious to get your take on this as far as tech goes. So I think, we're both roughly around the same age. And so we remember when the huge distinction between digital immigrants and digital natives was being pushed all the time. And the younger kids, they're growing up with the technology, and, we're immigrants. So we have to kind of get up to speed, and we have to frame it in terms of the text so the kids can get it. And what I find, and I've found this now for 2 generations, it's not just the Zoomers, it's also the millennials. They don't actually understand tech, except for the ones that do, on the whole, very much, because it may be automatically part of their environment, but that doesn't mean that they actually know how to use Word effectively, or how to get the features in an email, the most ubiquitous form of tech we've got, right, to do what it is that they want. And the idea that they would somehow be natives meant that, well, we didn't have to teach them any of this stuff. They would just pick it up on their own. And it was mostly like education experts in my case who were like, you must do things this way, you must understand it this way. And we'd be like, that ain't our experience at all. We Gen Xers are maybe more fluent with it because we had to grow into it and figure it out along the way.
Yeah. I'm of the age where they thought, when you were in high school or the early part of high school, that you would probably need to learn how to use computers one day. So they required you to take typing.
Yeah.
So that was your entry point into that. Now I got deeper in computers. It was a math elective kind of a thing. And that's kind of the path that I went down. when I was in school. But yeah, I mean, if you're my age anyway, and you were interested in computers, the thing is, you went through that phase where you had to be an engineer of sorts to make it work.
Right. Right.
To your point, a student today, my kids, it's an appliance. They don't know how this thing works, but you stuck it in their hand and it did what it did, and it works, and that's great. But they didn't have to, they never spent any time actually programming it or any of that kind of stuff that at least I spent a fair amount of my time doing when I was young, and still do to this day.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, the connection. So we don't teach ethics, right? And we don't teach, let's call it like the basics of technology to kids. And, big surprise that they're kind of at sea when it comes to a lot of these matters.
Yeah, I think that is right. Now, let me get back to that, because I'm curious about this myself, and I think about this, right? It's like, what are our opportunities here to do this, to do something about it? And, yes, we want to teach kids ethics. I think they ought to have a framework in it. But what they really need more than anything is exemplars. And that's really putting the weight on us at that point, right? Okay, are you going to do the right thing? And I know I have this conversation with my kids all the time. They'll say, well, so-and-so is doing this. And I said, yeah, but we're not those kinds of people. We're not going to not tell the truth about that thing just because it's inconvenient or difficult.
Right.
And, to the point of saying, but we're going to treat people fairly because that's the way we think that we think you ought to be, right? And again, I'm not having to go deep into, it's not a religious tradition for us. Now it's a ethical, philosophical kind of thing. It's like, well, if I can't trust you to tell me the truth, what kind of conversations can we have at that point? Because that means every time I talk to you, I have to figure out whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, that's a heuristic load that I just don't wish to carry at this point.
Yeah, I think you could say similar things with whether relationships are going to be essentially transactional or whether there are going to be some other values that are going to remain in play, even when it's not going to pay off, right?
Yeah, well, I can afford to play the long game most of the time and just be nice to everybody and think, well, I hope this will come back around, right? But I don't need it to. I mean, it's okay. I'm just going to be nice to this person and see what happens.
Yeah.
It shocks people when you are nice to them and they don't expect it.
I think that's right. Yeah, especially if you're nice to them when they've already been kind of crappy to you.
I mean, that's the best test, quite frankly. Right? How can I exceed this? How can I be, act with magnanimity, megalosuke? How can I be someone that's at that next level? If I were at that next level, how might I respond in this situation? I think it's a useful ruler, and it's one we fall short of all the time. But the idea is, it's like, wait, there is a higher standard. How can I be a good human when it's tough?
Yeah. Hey, I'm interested as well. This is kind of a jumping off. So, Conversations with Modern Stoicism, do you have any ones that are coming up, in the next few months or so that you're particularly looking forward to, that you'd like to boost a bit? Because I don't know what your schedule is, but I know that they're all good,
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, and I've continued to craft what I think this ought to be. So I've always said, I started with the idea we're going to use trusted voices, which is, kind of a no knuckleheads rule kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
But let's start with people that we know that they're thinking about this is solid, and there's something demonstrated in the world that that's a good place to be. And so that's a component of it, and I've got folks that I know that are back on the schedule or coming up soon, right? So I got one coming up with Donald Robertson, and I think we're going to talk about things people get wrong about Stoicism, right?
Okay.
As you practice, you think about what's going on inside a philosophy. Sometimes, I'm at the stage in my life where I'm tired of people explaining to me the difference between lowercase Stoicism, as Donald says, and uppercase.
Yeah.
But but you have to have that conversation with someone who's not familiar with the topic, right? You got to get them around that pothole early, because otherwise they just kind of get lost, right? If for example, if you think of I think like the movie a couple of years back, Brad Pitt, Ad Astra, and they talked about him being stoic, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
wasn't philosophically stoic; he was dispositionally stoic. And so in that case, it's like, yeah, that presented the problem all the way around for him. That's not particularly useful for us, right? But we're going to talk about things that people get wrong about Stoicism. Massimo's got a book coming out on Cicero. We're going to talk about Cicero coming up. This has caused me to go back and read stuff that I haven't read in the past, and to reread some things that I have read in the past. I got the Penguin Classic Cicero, and I'm going back through all of those pieces that they've pulled out, right? So I don't have to read every book all the time, but I'm reading the highlights, kind of a thing. I think the thing on Cicero is good. I haven't exactly figured out where I want to go with this, but Brittany Polat has already agreed to do, she just did the Stoicism and Jesus parallel sayings.
Yeah.
And lots of people who are practicing Stoics today did this either in connection with or as an escape from a Christian theology tradition. Right. And so kind of having some sense of that is kind of useful. And it's a thing that I don't think so much about what's the parallels or that kind of thing. But, when we're talking about this, like as I talk to her about it, I think about, all right, what did Jesus actually say? If we pared it down, sort of a scriptural, what's the word I'm looking for? Stephen Mitchell's written a book on it that I've read, and there's a couple others out as well. But, what was the part of the New Testament that Jesus actually said versus what the church added later, right? And so how do you strip it back to that, and where's the parallels there? And I think you're going to find more parallels there than you did with later tradition kind of stuff. But I think just talking to Brittany about that will be fun, and she's given it some thought.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. We had a great conversation, pretty far ranging. And it's interesting too, because you can do similar projects with other, let's call them wisdom traditions or modes of intentional living. Yeah. I think it's productive to do that, especially with the we're not going to try to evaluate them against each other and say, well, this one's better, this one's worse, or just trying to figure out, well, where are they similar, and then where are they quite different from each other,
Yeah, I'm kind of asking questions in a group, trying to see how they think about this, right? But we can get to the truth through a variety of paths, right? We might do that through philosophy. We might do that through religion. We might even do it through mythology at some point, because some of these might all have truths that they're leading you towards. It's just the lens is different. But sometimes you might end up in exactly the same spot. Sometimes they're going to be in very different spots. And they could be culturally influenced, etc. But I want people to think about it.
Bounce back and forth off of each other. I mean, a lot of those early church fathers, they had a philosophical education, and so they're engaging with Platonism and Stoicism. And the only thing that they all tended to agree on was that the Epicureans were bad and wrong.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then to live like Epicureans. But yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to highlight about, your current thoughts on things, the tech world, tech after 5?
All of these things in my life are going pretty well. I like the idea of bringing folks together. We just did this thing up at Tufts, and I can't remember if we talked about that or not, but we just had the Stoic Arts Conference up at Tufts, which brought people together in a room. And I was, having done all of these events electronically, online, et cetera, for so long. I mean, I love what we're doing online. I love the way that we bring people together online. But it was equally good to show up in Medford, Massachusetts, and have friends from Switzerland make the flight to come hang out with us, and folks from Florida, and then of course all our local Boston folks that were there, which is great fun. Now, I might know a thing that you might not know yet.
Okay.
And that is, I think, should the fates permit, that you and I are going to be in the same room in October this year.
Oh, for the 250
Philadelphia
year conference. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. They've
'Cause you're
reached
not
out to
coming
me.
here to Milwaukee, right?
I've been to Milwaukee, but not when you and I knew each other.
Yeah.
It was decades ago. But so they've asked me to come up and help with the event in Philadelphia.
Oh, awesome.
And so I will have some level of responsibilities, and have agreed to help them get this going the way they want it to. And, maybe there'll be even more to it. I haven't talked to them about everything yet, but we had a conversation last week about it. And they gave me the list, and I said, this is like an all-star cast. And some of these cats I've never been in a room with before, but I've done lots of work with them already.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, let's do that. So that's late October in Philadelphia. I think it's pretty cool.
The good thing about being a speaker is you got a lot of planning ahead of time, and you got, you maybe second guess the things that you're putting together, but you get your talk done and now you're free.
Yeah. Right.
Whereas if you're helping out with the organization or the tech or something like that, you got to kind of be on the whole time. Right.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't think they don't have a tech responsibility for me, but it's kind of a stage management and maybe an MC kind of a thing. But I think it's all those pieces because they haven't done that bit before. But I said, one of my favorite things, and I said, this was not set up this way at Tufts, but I made a change as we got closer to the event and just did it. And that was, I got all the speakers as well as some of the audience together the night before the conference.
They have decided to do that, but I think it's going to be virtually. They're not doing it the night before the conference, though. They want to do it.
They're going to do something online ahead of time, which I think is fine. Yeah. And we've done that. But I think, for everyone who bothers to get on an airplane and get there, the day before, we'll just get together and have drinks and maybe something light. It's the conversation that matters, not what we're sitting around that matters. And so what I saw at Tufts, and I've seen this happen in other places when you get this right, you get enough of the speakers and people together, and then from the stage, you will hear stories that have been impacted by the conversation from the night before. So they basically are weaving threads in or making sure it applies even better because they talked to another presenter, so they knew they were either going to lean into or lean out of something that they had. And you're like, well, did you know about X or did you know about Y? And then on stage, they're like, well, and that comes up. So I think
that
that's
happened. Stoicon 2016, which was in New York, and Stoicon 2018, which was in London. John Sellers set it up so that we all went out to dinner, all the speakers, and got to meet each other. I mean, it was cool getting to meet Long. Sort of like being like an amateur musician and, going backstage.
He's on my list. Yeah.
So that was a real highlight for me. Plus, Chris Gill is like equal in stature too. And they did that too for when Massimo organized it. And it was more of an organizational, like modern Stoicism committee kind of thing. I think we had some business that we had to discuss. But it was nice. Yeah, you're right. Being in the same place, getting, and it not having to like rush to do it was really important. As a matter of fact, Massimo hosted a dinner at his place. I don't know. Did I ever tell you the story about meeting Ryan Holiday?
No. So that would have been 2016, right?
Yeah. So I didn't, I knew he was kind of a big name, but I'd never.
He wasn't quite as big then as he is now, but
I'd never seen a picture of him.
So I see.
Massimo hosted a dinner party at his place, and Ryan Holiday's pretty young,
Yeah.
And a lot of the people there were people who I really, really wanted to meet. Julia Annis was giving like a keynote and stuff like that. Although Ryan Holiday was like the keynote speaker. And so I was
Right.
like, wow, Julia Annis is there. Holy crap. I get to like talk with her. And there were a bunch of other people too, who I was like, oh, this is really awesome. So I got myself some, it was like finger food kind of stuff. And I think I had a beer or something, and I'm in the kitchen and he's standing off in the corner. And for some reason, I thought he must be like Massimo's daughter's boyfriend and
Nice.
not really into the whole thing. And so I go up to him and I'm like, hey, so, what do you think? You like this Stoicism thing? And he looks at me like I'm nuts. And he's like, yeah, I think it's really interesting. And then I was like, so where are you from? And he's looking at me like I'm crazy. And he's like, Texas. And I was like, oh, that sounds nice, And so I'm chatting with him just like he's some ordinary person.
Yeah.
And then, I go back and I'm chatting with the people who I really wanted to like pick their brains. And then the next day, I see him called up to the stage and I'm like, oh, so
that guy, that guy.
Yeah.
Is it that funny? Yeah.
He must have thought I was some sort of nut, but what are you going to do?
That's right. I didn't know. That's funny though. No, you have not told me that story before.
Yeah.
But it could happen. And he is, by comparison to, particularly then, so much younger than everybody else probably in that space.
Yeah. I mean, that was 10 years ago. So yeah. Well, I don't want to hold you up much longer. You've been very generous with your time. And any last words you want to impart to people as we wrap up?
Well, thank you for having me, of course. I enjoy doing this, and I'm proud of the other work that we've done together, through Stoicons and conversations events and so forth. I think we've done some good stuff. I think that where you are headed with Andy to do this Stoic Heart, I think there's a need there. I had done a poll recently inside our group and said, where do you think Stoicism can help you the most? And I really thought it was going to be professional. And family was almost a dead tie. Yeah. Almost a dead tie. So I think there's lots of relationships, although I think you're focused on the romantic relationships, but I think there's a lot of relationships at home. Captive relationships are always the most challenging, I think. And so, yes, we got to figure out what we're going to do about that and how we're going to make it work. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. So good for you. Thanks for having me. There's got to be two of you. You are spitting stuff out at a rate that I just can't even understand how you produce so much. And I see all of this come through my feed and I'm like, oh my God, Greg, I have to pick what I can read because there's so much going on. So I appreciate what you're doing for the public discourse. I think
thanks.
There are people out there that need what you're doing, and they're going to latch onto the spots that they understand and make sense for them. And hopefully you're impacting a lot of folks, just making their lives better because you're improving their thinking. So,
well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for those very kind words on your part.